Milwaukee County Transit System, I'm just going to throw out a few numbers here for you. So pre-pandemic, any guesses as to how many rides Milwaukee County Transit System provided? Now this is pre-pandemic per year. So just kind of do the math in your head. We have a metro region of about 1.5 million. 1 million are in the service area of MCTS. And you see the buses going around our community. Mayor McBride. 150,000 a day. I think you may have Googled it, but that. So, guys, that translates into over 30 million rides per year. And sometimes in this work, I hear nobody takes the bus in Milwaukee. Well, 150,000 people a day. That is, doing the math here, about 4 American Family Fields. So maybe we should say that nobody goes to Brewers games. Of course, we would never say that. Tom can talk to you a little bit about, MCTS and, their footprint in the community, the service they provide. I just want to say, as a rider myself, my wife and I really appreciate you guys' service over this pandemic. And I'm not just saying that. At the height of the pandemic, when it was really scary, you didn't really want to go a lot of places. My wife, especially using the bus every day, always felt 100% safe because of the social distancing you guys did on the bus, the mask use, and the friendly enforcement of the mask requirement by MCTS's drivers. So just as, on behalf of me and my wife, I just appreciate you guys' work in that. Because especially at the height of the pandemic, it was rare to find a public place you could be in where you felt taken care of and safe, and county buses were that. So Tom, I want to open our conversation a bit here with the changes of Milwaukee's transit system. Technology has changed everything. When I first rode the bus back in the early 1990s, I remember it was 65 cents. It was 2 quarters, a dime, and a nickel. You received a paper transfer. If you would have told me back then that I'd be able to pull out a device out of my pocket and track a bus in real time and see it on a little map, that would have felt like science fiction. So both on the front end of that, the user experience, which I think is very pertinent for our earlier conversation, right, when we're talking about inclusion and welcoming environments, that user experience is so important. On the front end of that, you have your user experience of using that. And then, of course, there's the back end of how you guys, manage this hugely complicated system. Can you just kind of talk to me a bit about those changes, both the ones that I see as a user, the ones that I might not see, and what impact that has on the service that you guys provide?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just at the start, thanks, Dave, for the invitation to be here. Thanks to everyone that's also been here. I recognize a lot of people that I've worked with over the years. Brian Engelking from Waukesha Metro and Joy Nielsen from Milwaukee County Transit, getting that regional plug-in. But yeah, there really have been, and I should add too, just on the initial perspective of being positive. Last 5-7 years, there really has been a lot of dramatic changes over at Milwaukee County Transit, some of which you might not really be aware of. But the one in particular, Dave, that you're mentioning, is just the transition from older technologies to newer ones. So mentioning the paper passes and the paper tickets, that actually began just only as recently as 2015. Seems like forever ago, but it really wasn't. And so now we have the M card, so you can load dollars onto the card. When the bus shows up, you board, you simply tap your card in the fare box and you're on your way. And then only 2 years after that was the Ride MCTS app, which became super popular. Again, as Dave was mentioning, you can buy a fare on the app. You can look at a Google Street View of your bus stop so you know where you're going. You can track your bus on a kind of a Google map. And just kind of, very super cool technology, something of which we kind of assume you're already doing today. But that began, I guess, in this, like I said, 2017. So there's a lot of, major wins, I would say, just from that perspective of trying to look at improving the rider's experience is kind of the phrase that we use over at MCTS. How can we simplify the system so it's very easy to use, no matter where you're going. But yeah, I guess another technology improvement was just, again, going in the older days, we sort of trained the drivers to sort of call out the streets as they're driving the bus. So you as a rider would know, I'm going into this new area, not really familiar with it, where am I really? And but now that's all been automated. So you have audio announcements, you have visual signs inside the bus that provide that next bus stop information. Or they also provide public service announcements about major upcoming changes. So we're really, again, trying to just sort of, within the last 5-7 years, really simplify that process to make it easier and more open for the users.
Appreciate that. So the Brewers last went to the World Series in 1982. That's been about 40 years, and I bring that up because that is, previous until now, the last intentional redesign of Milwaukee's transit system. So the system that I used as a kid was, based originally on the streetcar lines. In fact, a lot of the numbers were the same, which is kind of an interesting historical artifact. But really around that time, late 70s, early 80s, was when you guys, when Milwaukee County, sat down and intentionally designed the system. So flash forward to today, and we have our first system redesign in about 40 years. It's been called MCTS Next. And you may have seen it on the sides of buses or billboards all over the city. So that's probably one of our biggest changes in recent times. Could you just talk to us a bit about what led to Milwaukee County Transit System's decision to do a big redesign? Because that's quite a, for a system that serves that many people, that's quite a heavy lift. And what does that mean then for your riders and just kind of the community as a whole?
Yeah, it really began with, I would say, listening to the riders, the surveys that we would do annually, asking, what are the challenges in the system? And number one was typically the frequency. The buses weren't coming, more as often as people would like. There was also an acknowledgement that, you don't really serve some of the job centers that have developed, right, over time. And just, kind of a third point would be just make the system easier to use, kind of simplify some of the confusing names that you have for the routes, for example. And that's really what we did, with MCTS Next. It was a long-term process. It began, in 2017. And because, in the best interest of collaboration, we wanted to make sure that we went out to the public. We did develop 2 options for a plan. And then we took that on the road, so to speak, went across all the different, the city, the suburbs, and just sort of presented these plans as options, and then got a lot of great feedback. And then we sort of took that feedback, created another sort of proposed plan, and then we took that plan back to the public and got their feedback once again. And that was something that was approved, it was kind of in good shape, I would say, by 2019. And then, as sort of the urging of the County Executive Crowley and the County Board of Supervisors, we then took another look at it just from terms of a racial equity standpoint. Are we really focusing on that in terms of improving opportunity? And we did some further tweaks of the plan, and then finally submitted that plan for approval with the County Board, I would say it was fall of last year, 2020. And thankfully got support. And then really over the course of this year, 2021, given the massive nature of changing the whole system, we broke it into thirds. We typically change our schedules 4 times a year. So we put changes in place for the spring, summer, and fall. And then so basically we wrapped up that entire system redesign. And so it's, from a rider perspective, we're serving job centers like along Miller Parkway or Brewers Boulevard, whichever one you want to call it. But we didn't really serve those areas very well. We didn't really serve some of the job centers over at 124th Street, whether it's on on the Waukesha County side in Butler or on the Wauwatosa side. We're now serving South Highway 100 better than we ever have before. We also, again, really focused on improving that frequency. So we looked at where were the riders using the system, and then we sort of shifted some of that very lightly used service that wasn't used very often, and put it in new corridors, actually 6 new corridors, so you have more high-frequency service. We define that as buses coming every 15 minutes or faster. So prior to Next, we only had about 10 high-frequency routes. Today we have 16 high-frequency routes. So we went from a system that was technically 40% high-frequency to now it's 60% high-frequency. And we're already seeing kind of the positive results of that through, increase in ridership. It's something we're going to continue to evaluate because it takes a long time for people to sort of learn all the changes. But we're confident it was definitely a step in the right direction.
Great, thank you. I'd just like to report too that MCTS Next has improved outcomes in the Steele household. My wife went to an appointment on the bus and then got back way earlier than we thought she would.
I should just mention for everyone's sake, Dave was at one of our first outreach meetings, so thank you, Dave. So.
I'm a transit geek. Okay, buckle up. Bus Rapid Transit is coming to Milwaukee. So we've heard a lot about Bus Rapid Transit. We've talked a lot about it today, BRT. This, I think, is not an exaggeration, and I did check with Sewer Pack about this. This is the single largest transit investment in our area in probably 30 years, and that includes, the Milwaukee streetcar. This is a concept that really has been around for a while in Latin America, Asia. It's just starting to kind of pop up here and there in the United States. This will be the first one in Wisconsin. The second one will be in Madison that will run from Easttown Mall to Westtown Mall, or I guess Westtown Mall to Easttown Mall, depending on how you look at it, right through the isthmus. So BRT's coming to Wisconsin. I think, in the next 5-10 years, when you think about buses, you're going to be thinking about these BRTs. So I like to say this is not your uncle's transportation system, at least not my uncle's transit system. So how will this be different than a quote-unquote regular bus? And I will say that as a resident of Story Hill, where the route is running right through, not all of my neighbors are on board. So help me out when I'm talking to my neighbors about how this will be different than a regular bus route and how we'll all benefit from it.
Yeah, it really is going to be kind of a major change, and unlike most things in life, until you see it, it might not register how different it's going to be. But it's mostly a lot of design features that are going to be unique to the BRT that are not used for regular bus service. So one example is there will be about half of the corridor between downtown and the regional medical center. There will be a separate bus lane that's just for the BRT. So you don't have. So then the benefit of that is you don't have. You're running into congestion. So you build that reliability into the system because the bus will be there when it says it's going to be there. You will have stations instead of a bus stop. So a station that will have a platform that's built up, kind of like what we're sitting on now. The BRT will show up. It'll be a level boarding, so you just walk right on. You won't need to sort of have that fare box right next to the driver. Because you will either have paid your fare, whether it's through your app on your phone, or there will be a ticket vending machine at the station that you can buy your ticket. So the bus shows up and you walk right on. Simple as that. The other thing that's cool about it is that it'll be a battery electric bus, so it won't be a regular diesel bus. Maybe it was a year ago or so, we had a vendor come in trying to show us their battery electric bus. These things are very quiet. Their acceleration is much quicker than a diesel bus. It really is kind of you really have to kind of experience it. And this might sound totally geeky, but it's just very quiet. And it's also very, like I said, good acceleration. There will be like real-time information signs at the station, so as you're waiting, you see when the bus is coming. So it's just a lot of, more of a premium level of bus service. And I think we mentioned at the beginning, Dave, buses coming every 10 minutes on weekdays, every 15 minutes on weekends. So I think just the fact that, one last thing, looking at the corridor, which is served by the Gold Line route today, there's like 35 bus stops between, like, say, Prospect in Wisconsin to the MRMC. There's only going to be like 16 bus stations. So you're just having a wider spacing. Instead of having buses stop every 2 blocks, which is about a quarter of a mile, the spacing for the BRT stations will be about every half mile. So you're just going to get more speed because of that wider spacing. So I think, once people see it, it's really going to be very clear that this is a major upgrade, and might attract people that might otherwise say, well, the bus is kind of slow, but BRT is clearly not that.
Okay, so I'm going to close with a question about the future. And what are your plans for the future? What are your biggest challenges and biggest opportunities right now? When I say the future, let's kind of look out towards the end of this decade. So in 2030.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, BRT is still the future. It's looking like a fall of next year start, so kind of around the corner. We're also working with, and this is something Milwaukee County initiated with Sewer Pack, with Kevin Muse and Jennifer and their team, the second potential BRT corridor. We're calling it now a north-south. They're doing a north-south transit enhancement study, which is kind of focusing along that 27th Street corridor. It's still in the feasibility phase, still more steps to come. But that could be a potential, BRT line at some point. And I think, we'll clearly evaluate, how east-west BRT is doing. Hopefully we get to a north-south BRT. And then, there's potential certainly for other corridors, like a National Avenue, Greenfield Avenue corridor, or maybe a Fond du Lac Avenue corridor. But from a challenges standpoint, and not to sound like a broken record, but funding is always there, right? It's something that to reference Sewer Pack, they did a 2050 analysis of our peer systems. And it's really only us and Nashville, Tennessee, that does not have a dedicated set of funding for their transit system, which typically comes through like as a sales tax. So given that absence of dedicated funding, you're really it's hard to build predictability into the system 5 years down the road because you don't know what's happening in 5 years down the road. And one of the things that we've been good at, realizing that there are constraints, we still want to be innovative. We still want to take advantage of grants as they come in, or even, like I say, with MCTS Next. One thing I didn't mention, that was all done in a cost-neutral way. We didn't ask for, $10 million or what have you, or to hire a consultant to do the study. We did all the work internally. We got it through, and now we're seeing some of the positive fruits for that. So, but funding is always there, as a challenge. But I think, given all the other, circumstances, certainly now under COVID, that are in place, and thankfully, from some of the money from the feds, things have been stable. But unfortunately, that money won't probably be there forever. And then how do we, again, move on to the next phase where we can still do the things, we can meet the needs that employers want us to meet. We can advance racial equity by providing that better service, by opening more opportunities to connect people in a better way. And I think, as many people have said too, just as a last point, a 40-foot bus isn't always the solution depending on where you're going, as Mayor Olson mentioned. There are new solutions. It's great to see that Sewer Pack and UWM got the grant to look at an innovative way of providing that last mile solution. We can we can provide great frequency to places in the city, and then maybe from that point is where that van or that shuttle or what have you can get you out to the Coles on West Silver Spring, or the Franklin Industrial Park down at Oakwood, where it's a little hard to serve that with a bus, at least in a cost efficient manner.
Very good. Well, thank you, Tom.